Good evening, YouTube. You guys that are watching another segment of the Qliphort. Today we are going to be doing the Qliphort Monarch deck profile, and there's a good thing as well as a bad thing within this deck profile. The good thing is that there's no extra or side deck. This deck doesn't play an extra deck, and I really couldn't compose a side deck because it was just... I was just so busy trying to fix the main deck. It's completely different from what you guys seen inside of the Deck Pro Duel, but I think that if you guys still want to see a quick assessment of how the deck is played, you can always go to the Deck Pro Duel in itself. The link will be in the description, and that will give you basically a view of how the deck is played and how the deck is used. Just to let you guys know, this video is brought to you guys by Ultimate Guard. If you guys would like to have protection for, you know, your cards, for your most expensive cards, I suggest you guys get an Ultimate Guard deck box or an Ultimate Guard binder. Let's get to the deck profile though. There's 3 copies of Stealth, 3 copies of Helix, only 2 copies of Carrier, which I will talk about a little bit later, 2 copies of Monolith, 1 copy of Scout, 1 Cephalopod, 1 Shell, and 1 Aether. These cards, I would like to say I did quite a bit of playtesting, and I decided this ratio was the best ratio. I only run 2 copies of Qliphort Carrier because this effect isn't that great. Not only does it targets, it returns, which is a good thing, but it deals with monsters. And most of the time, when I'm returning monsters, is not necessarily the best thing ever, which is the reason why Compulse isn't that great of a card this format. Qliphort Helix, I feel, has a little bit more utility. Not only was it harder to bring or to play 9 scales, Qliphort Helix also deals with the opponent pendulum cards. It deals with Solemn Strikes, you know, Solemn Warnings, and other pesky back row. Stealth, I felt, was the best Qliphort card since Qliphort Scout. And, you know, the fact that when it's summoned, you can't solemn it, you can't strike it, you can't respond to it or any of the cards inside of the chain link for Stealth, it really helped. It really helps, you know, get rid of opponent's pesky cards before they can, you know, respond to it or you know, use pesky effects. The 2 copies of Monolith and the 1 copy of Scout, there is no need for additional Monoliths, but if Scout was at, you know, more than 1 copy, I'd probably be playing more than 1 copy of Scout. But the engine of Qliphort's is so small because once you dig into your Scout, you know, via your 3 summons art or your amazing draw cards or even your wavering guys, there's no real need to go into more Qliphort cards. The Scout basically does all of the work for you. Cephalopod, I've actually tribute summoned and used this effect quite a few times because in this deck, not only sometimes you take a lot of life points, I have 4,500, 6,500, 75. I have 7,500. You know, you have to pay 7,500 life points worth of cards just in the traps, and then Qliphort Scout is 800, so that puts me at 83. So there was quite a few times where I've actually tribute summoned Cephalopod, and you know, I've treated like Carriers and Helixes, so I still gained some pretty good effects of removal, and then also I gained life points, which is pretty critical when you're paying so many life points for all of these cards. Shell not only is a 9 scale, it attacks twice. I really can't stress the fact of how good Shell is. And then that 1 copy of Aether. Keep in mind, all of your Qliphort cards, for the exception of Scout, you know, can be used with the Monarch cards. So Aether wasn't really as necessary as I thought it was, but most importantly, its effect isn't, I mean, it's great, don't get me wrong, but it isn't like, oh my god, it's amazing, it's game breaking, you know, for this deck in particular. For the regular Monarchs, it is godly, but, you know, until then, you know, it is what it is. Now I think we can get on to the spells. For spells, we have 3 copies of Summoner's Art, 3 copies of Wavering Eyes, 3 copies of Tenacity, 2 copies of Pantheism, which is extremely interesting, 2 copies of the Monarch Stormforth, and 1 copy of Sacrifice. Now we're gonna go right into, you know, a card that will have you scratch your head as like Qliphort. Only 2 copies of Pantheism, 2 copies of the Monarch Stormforth. Well, after thorough testing, I felt that those 2 were the weakest link at 3, so I decided to drop them to 2, mainly because, first of all, I needed more traps. Secondly, I needed to be able to make certain boards that Pantheism and the Monarch Stormforth didn't necessarily help. And thirdly is because I don't use these cards as much as I should, or as much as I can. I don't run as many Monarch cards as a normal Monarch player does, but I still can abuse the effects of Pantheism and Monarch Stormforth. So I decided to cut them at 2. Tenacity is at 3. for the sole reason that every single monster, for the exception of Qliphort Scout, which in turn Qliphort Scout searches a monster that's, you know, I can use for Tenacity. Tenacity becomes viable in every single one of them. So if I need Pantheism, I can search Pantheism through Tenacity. If I need a Monarch Stormforth, I can search via the Monarch Stormforth. So I just felt that Tenacity was the more important card. 3 Summoner's Art and 3 Wavering Guys. Like I said, this deck is really predicated on drawing which you need first. So 3 Summoner's Art, 3 Wavering Guys, and then the Sacrifice, because it's the best Qliphort spell card there is. I felt that this was really predicated to, like I said, drawing cards or getting your Qliphort Scout and then abusing cards from there on out. Now I guess we can get on to the traps. Alright guys, the traps, this is pretty straightforward. It's actually, like I said, this is probably one of the more douchebag decks of all time. We're going to run 3 copies of Solemn Strike, 3 copies of Lose One Turn, and you guys can already see, like, Qliphort, you get nasty in here. 2 copies of the Prime Monarch, 1 Escalation, 1 Vanities, 1 Skill Drain, and 1 Solemn Warning. When I was running the 3 strikes and a warning, I actually strongly considered running Ariana Grande, which is Guiding Ariadne, just because, you know, it's a scale, it's pretty easy to destroy with Wavering Guys running around, you know, even with Qliphort Helix as well. And, you know, I could search a strike or a warning. The reason why I opted against it is just because I felt that there wasn't a card that I would take out for it. But I definitely want to give it a try. And if you guys want to see me play this deck, Twitch is probably the best way to do it. When I stream on Twitch, it's like, hey, Qliphort, play that yellow swag Monarch deck you be playing. If you can get off the escalation combo, which is mean, if you have, like, you know, if you can start pendulum summoning monsters, and if you can search that that Monarch monster, which is Aether, or your Qliphort Cephalopod, or even your Qliphort Shell to your hand, as well as have escalation and Qliphort Monolith on board, then you're probably going to win the game, because you're going to tribute cards on your opponent's turn, you're going to tribute your monsters on your opponent's turn, summon your Qliphort monster, and then gain so many effects it's not even funny. Lose One Turn coincides perfectly with this deck, because every monster in this deck that would be special summoned, you don't really care about them going to attack and defense, because you're more often than not going to tribute them off anyways, and it hinders the opponent so much. Basically, I've won a couple of games just because of Lose One Turn. You know, it prevented the opponent from going, every extra deck set that they would go into out my monsters, it would get switched to defense, and then I would just tribute monsters, or, you know, keep pushing my monsters over them. Skill Drain actually is, you guys would think, is a really tricky card, because it stops my Aether, it stops my Cephalopod, it stops my Stealth, but more often than not, unless I'm playing against Cosmo, because Cosmo's the new, you know, boss in town, when I Skill Drain, I win, because, you know, my monsters are just outright stronger than yours, and I can normal summon them. So, unless, again, I'm playing against Cosmo, which, you know, I'll probably side in a 3rd Monarch Stormforth and then tribute their monsters, I pretty much am guaranteed to win, because my monsters are just completely outright stronger than all the opponent's monsters, and they can't activate their precious monster effects. The Prime Monarch was a card that I bounced forward of taking out and taking in, and I felt that it was one of the most mandatory Monarch cards in the deck for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a draw engine in its own if you draw it, and you decide not to discard it with Pantheism. There was multiple times where I've just not used the effect of Pantheism to banish itself, and then I just cycled in back my Monarch cards to Drew cards, which actually, you know, helped a lot. Secondly, if you destroy your scales, or if you're barely setting up scales, it's pretty good for tribute fodder. And the reason why I say this is because if you have a Qliphort card in your scales, you cannot special summon other monsters except for Qli monsters. So it sucks in that essence, but then at the same time, you go through your scales pretty fast, or you know, you can send it to the graveyard or get it to the graveyard fairly early, and then special summon it. As you guys should know, Vanity's Emptiness is Vanity's Emptiness, Solemn Warning is Solemn Warning, and there's not really much else to say about that. Well, thank you guys so much for watching another segment of the Qliphort. I actually do have Monarch decks for sale if you guys are interested. Go ahead and check my binder video or my Google Docs located in the description. Please, please, please like this video, because this is the best video of all time. But thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, but most of all, enjoy.